Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Dave Barrow, who is physiotherapist, and you guys may know him more as being the co-founder at Rehab Guru, which is taking the world by storm at the moment in this space. So, Dave, thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction as well. I don't think I've ever had quite such a fantastic intro. It's a real pleasure to be with you and lovely to chat with you again.
Yeah, no, likewise. Likewise. So we've had a couple of conversations, but I'm always intrigued as to David. My brothers are David, so I always call him Dave. But like, where are you from, and what do you tend to get called normally?
Well, it depends who's calling me, really. My mum's English, and so she was adamant as a child that I would be David. No one would call me Dave. She wouldn't go with my dad's side, which is Welsh, and call me Daff or Di. So I've grown up with these different names depending on whether my northern mates when I was at university, I don't think they ever heard of the name David, so I was just Dave to everyone. And it's Di if I'm in Wales, or Daff if it's my dad, or David if it's my mum. So I've got some other names from rugby and from other sports which we won't go into, but you can genuinely just call me whatever you want, and I'll reply.
Yeah, sounds good. No, I was in North Wales at the weekend. Absolutely spectacular. So I don't know if you're north or south, or your dad was north or south.
So South Walian, and although my dad actually was born and bred in London, he would be far quicker to tell you that he was Welsh, even though he doesn't even sound like a Welshman. But still harbours that sort of, I don't know whether it's resentment or competitiveness to North Walians. But I don't mind. It's absolutely beautiful. You know, Snowdon is just gorgeous at this time of year. Like the sun's shining at the moment, and some of my friends have been up there, whether it's Snowdon or the Brecons, and the sun's shining in God's country, as many would say, and you just can't beat the scenes. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
no, it's incredible. I've been a few times go over there, and I but did used to go as a child a bit, but it's spectacular. Like you don't need to go abroad. It's absolutely amazing. But
No,
anyway, this wasn't going to be a pitch for promoting Wales, but we got onto there anyway.
tourism Wales.
So where did you grow up then?
Scotland. Sorry, say that again.
That's all right. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in northeast London. So my dad's from the East End. He's like an old East End boy. My mum's a little bit more posh, and we sort of grew up somewhere in between. So I grew up being really sporty. My mum was a PE teacher. My dad played for Sarries. He didn't get any international caps, unfortunately, but I was sort of just brought up being sporty, and got into physio because one of my dad's best friends was the physio at Sarries in England and British Lions, and I just sort of it was almost ordained and destined for me to go into physio. And at 15, I realised that I had a brain and I could use it. Up until then, I wasn't too keen on school, but knowing what I wanted to do at a younger age really sharpened my mind. And then went from there to Nottingham Uni, did my undergrad, did some postgrad stuff in Australia, made some wonderful friends along the way and some great memories. And it was after graduation where I sort of realised that I wasn't going to make it as a pro rugby player myself, and that physio was definitely the way for me. That me and some of my colleagues from the military stumbled upon this idea of Rehab Guru, of which many other people have probably had the same idea, and some people have had the same idea. So now, it's a bit of a booming industry, and we're really glad that we stuck through it, because we were and still are a real bootstrap startup. So the term essentially, for anyone that doesn't know, means that you haven't got any external funding. So no angel funding, no crowdfunding, no venture capital funding like Dragon's Den type stuff. We just created the code ourselves, created the library, and created the product alongside clinical practice. So I stepped out of full-time clinical practice earlier this year, but otherwise was trying to blend professional sport where I was working. And one of your other hosts that you had, Milesy, was my boss at Quins, and then he obviously went on to I think he went on to Scarlets and then to Blues, and now is with Wales. So I was trying to juggle professional sport and military and private work on top of Rehab Guru. So it was quite a whirlwind with some great memories. Hopefully in the long run, not too many regrets. And now we're here with Rehab Guru, and thankfully made something of it, which is really fortunate.
No, it's amazing. It really does look good. And we'll come back on to talk a bit more about that, because it was really interesting, your definition of bootstrap there, which I've not heard that one before, but it's that makes sense. But just going back to when you were starting out, so you said you were 15. Did you really decide that you thought you were going to be a physio at that point then?
Yeah, so I really fell into it. I was not that interested in school, as I said, and I was set up with a work experience placement, as you do in your sort of GCSE 2 years. And I was set up with a family friend in an office, and it fell through at the last minute. And so I was told by the school, you have two last options, which are the ones that they provide for you. And I thought, oh no, these are the ones no one wants. One of the options was working in a cake factory. And I thought, well, I like cakes. Well, you can tell I like cakes. And I thought, oh, I don't think my mum and dad would be very happy if I did that. And the other one was working in a physio clinic. And I thought, how comes no one's chosen this? Like, I know what a physio is. I knew then. I thought, this is a pretty Gucci job. And I thought afterwards, oh, maybe it was meant to be. Maybe there was a reason that everyone else left it. So I went and worked in this physio clinic, and I just fell in love with it. And it was really exciting. It was someone that ran a private clinic sort of 2 days a week and then worked in the NHS 2 days a week. So I saw a real wide range of different healthcare in that. And I just thought, yeah, I could do this for a living. Didn't seem like work. This person was just a great communicator, and these people loved her, and they didn't sort of go there and give her woes. It was just this lovely exchange. And I thought, this doesn't feel like work. This is brilliant. And for many great years, I've worked in physio and had those times, a lot of them in sport and in the military, and it's a lovely environment. It's an environment that suited the way that I was brought up, and the way that I am. And so that's where it started, and then did my A levels, did another work experience with someone else during A levels, and was fortunate enough to get into a physio school.
Right, yeah. So is that, when you said that, that's interesting as well. So you just didn't look like work, and you could see they were a great communicator. Is that something which you've seen throughout, that say the successful or good physios are good communicators then? How important is that?
Yeah, I used to, so it's interesting because I worked in rugby, and a lot of the people that I worked with knew about me playing. And so we'd be on the training park, and there'd be a few of the players would be surprised at what I could do, but the coaches knew. And so there was just this sort of like connection with me, because sport can be quite egotistical, and it can really ring fence people. And if you're not part of the clan, then you're outside of it. And I sort of had this opportunity to be in, but at the same time, I knew I wasn't wanting to be part of the club. I knew as part of the medical staff, I had to sit slightly out of that. I couldn't be, going out on the piss with them, or, although that does happen sometimes. And I just sort of thought maybe I didn't know why, I just felt like I needed a distance. And someone said to me a couple of years ago, I was speaking to them, and this guy is really renowned within sport, a guy called Gordon. And he said to me, yeah, I could tell you got on well in sport because you don't carry and throw your ego around. And it's so true that when you're with athletes, they are so vulnerable before they go out onto the pitch. And they need a backroom staff that will say only things that are positive and supportive. And as I've become more aware of our profession globally with Twitter and social media, there is, I think, a lot of people who would love to work in sport, but cannot, because it's too important for them to tell you their opinion and tell you that they're right. And if you try doing that to a coach or to a player, and you undermine their confidence, and they go out and they're absolute toilet because they've been told, no, you can't have your back minute, it doesn't work. Well, I'm sort of really nerved. They might not compute that nerves equate to muscle tension, and I'm feeling pain. They just want some help to get them out there. And someone that turns around and just gives them chapter and verse on, what is the 101 of healthcare, you're not going to last very long. And communication is really important. It's not to say that you just give the patient everything that they want. One thing I learned in NLP is pace and lead. You've got to meet someone where they are. and communicate the way they are and speak their language and build rapport with them. And that can happen very quickly, like 30 seconds quickly, when you become good at it, and then lead them out to where you want them to go. It doesn't have to be, and so, you know, the way that we communicate really has a massive impact on the results that we get. And if someone doesn't like the results of their life, well, how are they communicating? How are they behaving? And I think I was fortunate with my upbringing to sort of have some sort of exposure to that, because my dad played for Saris. He then coached them in the 80s. And so I was brought up with someone who, you know, maybe as an athlete, probably does have a bit of an ego, but he knew when to talk and when not to talk. And he knew when someone was in trouble, how to talk to them to bring them out of their shell. And whether that was someone who was a player that was injured, or whether that was just a man on the street, he just seems to have this way of talking to people. And I feel like maybe I learned a little bit of that. Yeah, it was really interesting to see it from Jenny, God rest her soul, who was my tutor when I was 15, when I went and worked with her for a week or so. And she was just this loving, lovely person. And I thought, wow, you can just have so many friends from being such an amazing person and not being a super athlete, and not being, you know, super intelligent, and not, you know, telling everyone, you know, chapter and verse on your life. You can just be a super cool person, a super nice person. And so those people just, I think I was always a bit of a watcher, a bit of an observer. I wouldn't go into a room and sort of like tell everyone about me. I'd sort of suss things out and just absorb sort of like the good things that I like. You probably know that with all the podcasts that you do and the people you interview, you just pick up little nuggets. You think, oh, really, you don't know why, but you're just really drawn to that person. And then, you know, you spend a bit more time with them, and you sort of hopefully through proxy pick up some of their good traits.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's really good to hear, like, think of work experience. And like mine, I remember mine, I went to a printers and I went to a solicitors, and similar to you, cancelled last minute. I just went and did them. But it's great to hear someone that went and did one and it's turned into like a really great career. So that's a really good sign. It does really make sense, doesn't it? The work experience thing. It's just it's difficult as a 14 or 15-year-old to pick where you want to go to. So it is good to hear that you had a successful outcome from it.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like when you went to Nottingham, then you articulated that really well and interestingly about like the communication piece, because a lot of people do focus on the academic side of things. How was that transmitted at university? Was that told as well? Was that were you taught around communication?
Yeah, so interestingly, and I don't mind people telling this, I completely flunked my A levels. I was too interested in playing sports, so I had really good predicted grades. And because I had predicted grades that were quite good, I think I took my foot off the pedal. And arrogantly, I wandered around like I was already in physio school, because I got 6 offers out of 6, and that was unheard of. But I think it was the way that I'd communicated into the interviews, and I had, you know, a few family friends that were physios that helped to coach me on that interview process. And I was devastated when I got my, I mean, it was a real lesson in not being arrogant and not thinking you've got your eggs before they're hatched. I was going to university on week 1, convinced that they were going to pull me aside and say, David, can we just have a word with you, because we gave you the position, but we've actually just reviewed your results again, and we've decided we're not going to let you in. And I was petrified this was going to happen to me. I think at 16, the anxiety around not, failing was really, really high. And actually they didn't. And there were other people that were in the same position as me. And we were told, actually, the exam results are not everything. We chose you because of you. I had some amazing lecturers, some who were very scientifically focused, and I don't have any other point of reference because I've not studied in the UK at any other universities, but they did have a lovely blend of real scientific lecturers with other lecturers who could match that scientifically, but also understood about communication, and some real weird and wonderfuls, which I just thought they were batshit crazy when I was at university. But actually, as I got out into the bigger, wider world, and I worked in the military for, how many years was I? 5 years with battlefield injuries. And, you know, standard medicine doesn't fit into that when, you know, you're learning how to heal and help a fracture heal, how to help a nerve heal, how to, you know, manage skin grafts. Normally in normal medicine, you're only dealing with one of those things. And all of a sudden you've got a case where all of them are together, and that's just on one limb. And they've got, you know, multiple other limbs that are missing. And, you know, there's things within their mind that, are, you know, they're not so happy about. And I actually reflected a lot on my university time and some of those lecturers who we just didn't really understand, who were talking to us about communication, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, and all that sort of stuff that we just thought, this is not science, this is not medicine, and it bloody well is. But it took me to have those life experiences to then reflect on it. So I'm a big advocate of that, even if people aren't ready to hear it. It still is sowing a seed.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I think that's good. And you mentioned NLP earlier on. Was that something, when did you start looking into that?
Good question. I heard about it in the military because some of my other colleagues had done it. The military were really quite forward thinking in the PT course, so physical training course. And NLP was courses that some of the lads could get on. So the rehab instructors that I was working with would be able to communicate in some of these guys who had just either given up or maybe, you know, they were a bit of a tearaway. And some of these guys just had them like putty in their hands. And like I said, building rapport so quickly. And I just asked them about it, you know, how, you know, do you know that person from before, or have you treated them before? How is it that, you know, you're talking to them, they talk to you like you know each other? And they said, oh, we just do this, that, and the other, and talked about it. So I was introduced to it, oh, maybe like over 10 years ago. And then when I worked at Headley Court, I became even more interested in it. And other colleagues of mine, and I guess through synchronicities, I was introduced further and further into it and had opportunities to learn about it, of which it is a useful tool, you know, one of many useful tools to use. Yeah, I just find it really interesting.
Yeah, no, me too. Me too. I've never done a proper course on it. I've read a few books and things, but it's I do think it's interesting. Seems like there's a lot to take in, isn't it? There's like a lot of different things of physical and like wording that are supposedly there.
Yeah, I find I've done the practitioner and master practitioner course, and I'd say that most people finish the practitioner course and then they start talking like robots for the next few years. And you can see some of them that are using it therapeutically, or perhaps those who are using it less ethically, like downtown on a Friday night. That was, you know, the latter was never me, I promise you. You know, as you progress in it, it's just learning to speak normally, and knowing, with permission, would anyone like some help? And in a healthcare setting, they're coming to you all the time. Even if you just use the basics of how to build rapport, or how to reframe things, how to help someone see the light when there isn't any. It's not about, you know, being a therapist. Sometimes it's just about sowing a seed. And that's what I was taught quite early on by a super guy called Dean, that I work with at Cranwell. And you know, he said to me, sometimes you might say something and that seed might not germinate for 3 years, and that's okay. You're not the therapist. You're not there to fix them, and you're not there to fix those parts of them, you know, within the period of time that we had them for. And you're probably never going to see those seeds flower. But it's just doing whatever you can and what you feel is right in the moment to help people.
Yeah, I can imagine it'd be really useful in that environment. And I was going through your LinkedIn profile, and it mentioned about the race across America. I was just intrigued as to how that one came about.
Oh yeah, well, I'm not a cyclist, as you can see. When I was at Headley, there were a load of lads who had varying degrees from, you know, 85% burns, triple amputees, gunshot wounds, the lot. And one way in which they really benefited from recovery was through sport. And often that was adapted sport, you know, adapted skiing, adapted climbing, adapted fishing, whatever it was that someone needed. And there were some amazing charities, one of which was Help for Heroes, which would fund a lot of these. And because those patients, those lads, were still under medical care, in order for them to be signed off by the consultants to say that the consultants who took the ultimate responsibility would consent to them going and, flying around a dune buggy when they're still under care, would be as if one of us member of staff was there with them. And so we were just asked to volunteer, and we just loved it. And it's a very unique, or was a unique environment, because your average person comes in for half an hour and then they go. But these guys would come in for 3 weeks to 3 months, and you're with them every day. You can't not communicate with them in a way where you develop bonds, unless you're not a human being and you completely put barriers up. But if you actually want to help those people to heal and get better, showing your human side is inevitable, because you're with them for 8 hours a day, so you can't not be a human. I just loved seeing that change in people, and I loved being able to engage in that part of the sport, which that was a part of me, and I could see the benefit. I knew the benefit of it. I knew how good I felt when I did some sport, when there was some competition, when I just did some exercise, when the social elements of that. And so I had some opportunities to do some of that volunteering, and one of them was the Race Across America. So Help for Heroes funded an 8-man team, and they did this twice. I did a support crew for them. So I was just, navigating, getting their food, doing the physio. There's a lot of mucking. If anyone that knows the Race Across America, it's a cycle race that goes from California, from Oceanside, which is where the Tom Cruise Top Gun was originally filmed, and you can go there and still see all of the volleyball pitches. It's quite amazing. And cycle through the desert, through the Rockies, through the Dust Bowl, through the Appalachian Mountains. It's an unbelievable race, but you've got to get it done in sort of under 9 days. And so there were these 8 wounded guys, some of them on hand bikes, lying down, cranking the arm cranks because they haven't got any legs, and sort of crawling like snails because you can't go as fast on them, and managed to do it in about 7 days in 2012. And so, for me, that was incredible, because I'd been with some of these guys since day one. I'd seen them, in a really, excuse my French, shit state, never quite knowing sometimes how they were going to get on. And actually to see them excelling and doing really well. And one of the guys, Jacko Van Gas in 27, that was his jersey from the Race Across America. So he's gone on to be a Paralympian, multiple gold medals, and has just released a book called Unequivocal. So I'll give him a little little promo for that. It's lovely to see them excelling, because the whole time you're thinking, I'm a failure. You're so used to people coming in and you get them better really quickly, and all of a sudden you've got this challenge that these people don't get better as quickly as you want them to. You internalize it and think, well, what's wrong with my skills? What's wrong with what I'm doing? And you can feel like a failure. It can be a really hard place to work, but a great place to cut your teeth. And being able to see those people progress, even if you just see it from afar, or you do a bit of volunteering and they happen to be on the team, then that was worth its weight in gold. But the other great benefit for volunteering is some of the business mentors that I now have, I met in volunteering. So on the 2017 Race Across America, there was a lad who had worked in the financial markets, and he'd worked for Lehman Brothers, and he retired in his 40s. And he just spends his time just giving to other people, doesn't get paid for it, doesn't want the money, doesn't need the money, but he needs that sense of purpose and giving back. And he's one of those people that's unconsciously competent. So incredibly competent, always has been. Everything he touches turns to gold, but he couldn't tell you why. Just born with one of those gifts, those annoyingly lovely people. Those sorts of people have just mentored me, because they saw that I was someone that, worked at Headley. I was giving my time for free, and they just wanted to help. Nothing in return. And you just meet these amazing people when you put your ego aside and you just do something for other people and do it in the spirit of giving, rather than thinking, well, if I do this, I will get X back. Don't think like that. You just think, well, I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do, and I enjoy doing it. You meet some amazing people along the road. I'm a big advocate of volunteering.
Yeah. So how did Headley Court come about then?
Oh, good question. I've worked in the military for several years before then, and I was on some of my postgrad stuff in Perth, in Curtin Uni, Perth in Western Australia. And I got a message from one of the lads, hi Tomo, if you ever get to listen, saying, I'm at Headley, I need a physio. You're the only person that I'd want. Do you want the job? It was literally like that. So there was no sort of interview process as were the good old days. Obviously, you had to go and meet a few people and had a sort of like probation period. But that's ultimately how it was. And my CV at that point, they were reasonably interested in it. So I was there for a couple of months, and they sort of kept me on because Headley is not necessarily an environment where you can put your CV forward and you can tell how good someone is, because there aren't many people that would ever have dealt with those kind of injuries. Someone might be amazing at orthopedics, they might be terrible at that sort of battlefield casualty. And there's an enormous part of it, which is just, can you tolerate that? Can you walk into a gym and be surrounded by 200 or 300 mutilated bodies every day? People with half a head, limbs missing. It's quite difficult emotionally. And to be able to do that for a long time, there's some people that just turned up on day one and by day three they were gone, or they just clammed up. There's a certain kind of person, so it's not just about what's on your CV or how good you are at memorizing your nerves and peripheral nerve injury. There's a lot more to it than that. So I was very fortunate to get on with a few of the people and have some success with what I was doing, and stayed there for 4 or 5 years, and I loved it.
How did you find that then, going into that environment?
Good question. I treated some people that had had amputations before, but I wasn't quite prepared for it. I think you should get on with it, because part of you thinks, I really need to do well here. Like as you would with any environment, you go into any job, you need to make a mark, and you need to, help people, and you need to do a good job. And then there's the other part of thinking, really need my poker face on here. And that was one thing that was instilled in me from the age of about 16 from the physio mentors that I had, of, when you're on the ward and you see all of this sort of stuff, you can't go to the patient and then vomit in front of them, or sort of go, "Quite blimey, your wound stinks a bit." Like you can't do that. You've got to be uber professional. So by that time, I'd already sort of cultivated that, poker face, and was quite good at it, because in professional sport, I remember one game we played against Bradford Bulls. The game got called after 60 minutes because on the third ambulance, the ref just said, we're not having this anymore. There was one suspected broken neck, there was a really bad ankle break, and there was one guy that got kneed in the throat, and he almost stopped breathing. And so I ran on, immediately worked out what was going on, called for the doc, called for the oxygen, called for the ambulance, called for everything. And like my adrenaline had been pumping then for over an hour, and I was quite glad that the referee pulled the game. So I'd been sort of used to seeing lots of things which perhaps weren't very nice, and just sort of getting on and dealing with it. It's been, how long has it been? 8 years since I left Headley. There have been times where I felt a little bit challenged, and memories have come up, but 4.5 years of that, I'm sort of not surprised. I sort of imagine it's just part of the course, and it's brought a huge amount of humility, that I'm not a superstar, I'm not a rock star, I'm not invincible, and it's a normal sort of thing. But at the time, anyone who put their hand up and said I'm emotionally in a bit of trouble, if you go back to like 2012, it wasn't the most welcoming or accepting culture for people that struggled with mental health. So if you did feel a little bit challenged, just get on the bike, get in the gym, smash out another session, crack on with it. And that very much was the mentality at the time. And it was the military, so we were treating special forces lads, we were treating lads that might have just been combat engineer, and they happened to have been blown up. So there's a real mix of people, all of which were battle-hardened, tough guys. And so it was just this culture of cracking on. So it was quite an interesting thing when I left. A load of people that had left before me, both civilian and military, sort of got in contact with me and said, you know, how are things going? And they just said to me, when I left, I had the biggest breakdown. I had 2 weeks where I just couldn't stop crying, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And when I heard them say that, it was quite loving, because I thought, wow, it's sort of giving me permission to actually process some of the things that, you know, you just put to the side because you just got to get through the next day. And you've got that patient that's just come in, and he's still got a trachea, and he's got no legs, and he's only got one arm. And you just think, God, this person's blind. They're never going to see their child again. They're never going to see another sunrise or a sunset, when they're in a wheelchair for the rest of their life. That's hard. You just want to give everything to them. So you're often putting other people before yourself. And so allowing yourself a little bit of time to heal afterwards is really important.
Yeah, I can imagine that could be quite traumatic, but you're with these people that are going through that themselves. So you're probably not able to be thinking, oh God, I feel awful, because it's like, well, how do you think they feel then, the people that have gone through the physical trauma and emotional?
Absolutely, yeah. But you know, I was creating Guru at that time, and that gave me another focus. You know, it allowed me to leave Headley and almost compartmentalize those parts of my life. I'd leave there, I'd go to Quins, and I'd have my evening clinics and, you know, games on a Saturday that I'd cover, and then I'd have Rehab Guru, and then I'd have my, you know, my wife and family and stuff like that, and actually compartmentalizing life and having real discipline and structure was really important, because otherwise I could have just volunteered all the time and then not looked after the other parts of my life. So having that discipline around when you stop work, and, you know, when are you going to work on Rehab Guru, when are you going to do your, you know, whatever it happens to, when are you going to get in the gym? And for me, that was up at 5. Before there was a 5 o'clock club, I was in the 5 o'clock club. And, you know, that's how I got through those things and managed to keep Rehab Guru going with my colleagues for that. So yeah, it was a tough few years, but I'm really glad that I did it, because I made amazing memories, amazing friends, and thankfully Rehab Guru is now in a position where I'm almost exclusively working full time on it, with a few, you know, private clients here or there on the side.
So what was the transition then? At what point, what was the first sort of seed in your mind that you thought about this, and when was that?
I would say it's when I decided to leave professional sport. So Marlsey was my boss at Quins, and I was just so busy, and I sort of juggled things up, and I worked at Fulham Football Club as well, and you know, binned that off, and I just suddenly realised that actually I miss playing sport. I really wanted to get back into sport myself, but I couldn't do, because I had evening clinics. I was working at Quins on a Saturday, Fulham on a Sunday. I was working 7 days a week, unless there was a weekend where there wasn't a game. And I thought, I'm missing my life here. I'm not making any memories of my own that I've really loved. And so I decided that, you know, I was going to stop working in sport, and I was going to get time for family, time for me. And also decided that with that, did I want to work in healthcare fully? Yeah, I did. I loved Headley Court. I really, really loved it. But when Headley started winding down, and as I, you know, started my transition out, I think probably a mixture of compassion fatigue and thinking, you know, do I want to work in pure outpatients, MSK for the rest of my life? I thought, no, actually, I don't. And so the plan in my mind at that time was, well, you got to think of an exit strategy. Then what's your exit strategy? Do you go back to sport? No, because I don't want to give up my weekends. And there was a really interesting conversation I had with one of the coaches at Fulham Football Club. He's a really top lad, and and he's such a good lad, because most of the people I work with in football I didn't really get on with, because I was like a rugby lad, but also I just found them a bit different. But I remember him saying to me that professional football is so hard because you're constantly working in entertainment. You work when all of your friends are having the day off, and the days you have off are when everyone's at work. So your days off, you're lonely. You're at home. your wife, your kids, they're at work and school, your friends are working. And so it's professional football, and to a lesser extent rugby, is a haven for divorced men. And I just thought, I don't want that life. So I stepped out of it, and I thought, what's your exit strategy? And so for me, the exit strategy was pile your effort into Rehab Guru. And so over the last however many 6-8 years, it's been doing Rehab Guru until 12, 1, 2 in the morning, waking up and then back into the healthcare job. And it's only in the last few years where I've made a transition where I've worked part-time in healthcare and then part-time in Guru. So as Guru got more money and I could take, a little part-time salary from it, that's allowed me to then do more and more. And thankfully, the pandemic was actually really great for us, as a lot of people transitioned from writing their exercises on a piece of paper into what we now know as just the norm. So I was really grateful for that, and we were just in a great position to run with it, and that's sort of how it just sort of came about. And I was a few months away from throwing Rehab Guru away, because I remember being in Spain, and I was in Spain. One of the other founders of Rehab Guru worked in film, and he's got this lovely villa in the south of Spain. And so I went and stayed at his, and I remember speaking to his dad about it, God rest his soul. And he said, "How's it going with Rehab Guru?" And I said, "I'm struggling a bit, mate. I'm putting everything into this, and I've got to make a decision." I said, I can't keep, working till 12 at night time. So I'm going to give myself 18 months. And I put a date in it, put a date in the diary. If I'm not taking a salary from Rehab Guru at this time, I'm putting it in the bin. Because at that time, the salary wasn't really sufficient, and the revenue wasn't sufficient to try and sell it. And so, I was pretty close to throwing it in the bin, which, these synchronicities, come about, and every opportunity comes with, in disguise sometimes. The pandemic was horrific. However, there were some companies, some people that were in the right place at the right time, and you never know where those right places and right times are going to come. It's just a question of having a bit of faith, I guess, as I look back now.
How close to that 18-month did you get?
About 2 months away. Mad, isn't it?
Were you already sort of like convincing yourself, actually, maybe 20 months, or were you like, no, I'm sticking to it?
So good question. I was really busy at the time, and so I was it was in the back of my mind. And then I got a call one morning from, I don't know whether I can say their name, but they, it was in the start of the pandemic. It's probably about March, April time. We need your software. We need to give it to all of our members. Can you send us a quote? And there was just this sort of like, like, it might be happening now. And that was the start of it. So really, really, really important. And going back to what you and I were talking about the other day, was these synchronicities didn't just come about because I sat meditating, asking for it, but I followed my passion, I followed my bliss. And one of those things was going to Manchester about a year or two previously, seeing one of my mates from the military, Dale, in Salford, and we went and saw, loads of people from all of these organizations. It was networking, but I didn't see it as networking because, I was in a physio lecture, listening to someone else, and I had lunch with this person, went and saw that person at the university, and I just met people and had really good fun. And I now know that's called networking. But at the time I didn't know. I was just catching up with friends, doing things that I loved in physio. And so now, following what we were talking about, like I've just now I'm in a position where I'm not working till 12 at night. I can do more of those things. And that's really important, because what's the point in having a company if you're not making memories, you're not having fun? I don't want to look back on my deathbed and think, you made a company. Like, what good is that? I want to have stories to tell my grandchildren. I want to have people to talk with. I want to be able to reminisce about great times with great people. and you can't do that if you're just working for a company. So yeah, the more of that networking, following your passion, follow your bliss is so important.
So what was that at the start then? Like, what made you want to do this? And like, did you have a very clear vision as to what it was going to be? And when was that?
No, I mean, like I said to you about my upbringing, I didn't have a business background. I'm still learning. I'm still very naive, really, compared to some people that may have, you know, a business degree, and they may have founded several other companies before they move into the space that I'm in at the moment. So those mentors are really, really important. And when we were first developing Rehab Guru, did we imagine that it would turn into, you know, hopefully a really massive company? Did I know what it would like to be a director? I still don't know, if I'm honest with you. But what is a CEO? Who wants to be a CEO? Lots of people want to be a CEO. What does it involve? What's the job description? You just sort of manage a company. But what does it involve? And I'd still struggle to explain to someone what that involves. And at this particular moment, I'm doing anything and everything. I'm spinning lots of plates, from legal stuff to accounting stuff with our accountant and legal team, to product development, you know, still in the photo shoot, taking photos, still looking at research and development, still doing, I don't do the coding, but planning that stuff. So I'm doing loads of different things. And I don't know how that's going to evolve over time, but a bit like, you know, your company, we're getting to the point where, you know, we've got another full-time developer, and, you know, you have different people that we're leaning upon to delegate roles to. And for me, could I see myself doing anything other than Rehab Guru? Not quite yet. There are people that do, you know, set up a company like Rehab Guru, and then they get other people to run it for them whilst they set up another company and another company. And I don't think I've quite got that entrepreneurial spirit to try and become a multi-millionaire and, you know, take over the world and have a place in Saint-Tropez. And, you know, for me, that's not fun. For me, playing sport, watching sport, arsing around with my friends, pranking each other, like, that's still me. I want to be able to do that. That's the fun stuff. Being with my children, that's ultimately what I want. And if Rehab Guru can get to the point where it allows me to do that, and I can still have fun, and still, you know, I love connecting with our customers, because they are physios, sports therapists, chiropractors, osteopaths, and that is still part of my bliss, is working in a team or working with those kinds of people. And at the moment, Rehab Guru gives me that. So top marks for it.
And when you were like saying we need to create this product, we probably didn't have a name at that point. What was it you were trying to solve?
So the problem that we had was that at that time, just for context, that would have been around 2010, so 12 years ago. We were working with people in the military, and they would come to us for 3 weeks, do 3 weeks rehab, and then they go, and then we'd review them some months later. And some of those people would come back for multiple 3-week stints, and they turn up for their reviews with these massive booklets of printed out exercises, not quite knowing which ones they were supposed to do and when they were supposed to do it. And some of them were trying to do all 3 of those booklets at once. There was just no organization and structure. And compared to where I was working in professional sport, where you just work with someone one-on-one, and, you know, it's so easy for them because they just turn up with their kit bag and their trainers and boots, and they've got someone that tells them what to do all the time. They just didn't seem, for your average punter, any sort of software that would help them to really engage well with their exercise and their rehab. And so that was the motivation. There wasn't a software, and if it was a CD-ROM. And we just saw that there was a better way of doing it. And clearly, we weren't the only ones. The features that we've released, partly now because we have enough users who tell us when they're happy and tell us things that would make them happier, we allow our customers to drive those new features. But in the early days, when we didn't have lots of customers, it was sort of like a wet finger in the air. Well, worked in sport, worked in the NHS, I've worked in private clinics. If I was in, if I was the 80,000 people that might use Rehab Guru, what would I want? And trying to think of the problems that we had faced and solving it. And Rehab Guru solved a lot of problems for a lot of people, but clearly you can see from whether it's the scan.com integration or whether it's the group class bookings or write your notes or whatever it is, features that we've added have been things that people have requested. So during lockdown, for example, people that are writing their paper notes wanted to transition to an electronic health record. But if they were a one-man band, someone that's working part-time around their family and around whatever else they're doing, they couldn't afford some of the really big EHRs that were costing maybe £60 a month or something. And those ones are great. We have great integrations with them. I'm a big fan of Clinico and Nucal. But if there's just a one-man band and actually they don't charge enough and they don't earn enough to afford those, they were asking us, do you have the ability for us to write notes? Oh no, we don't. We were being asked that in sort of like March time of the pandemic, and so we just reinvested our revenue and just made those things happen. So there's a combination of wet finger in the air and now just letting our users decide what they want.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then technology must have changed massively. Well, it has changed massively since 2010. So was that like a kick-on point when smartphones came out, and was that something that you could see that was going to allow things to progress, streaming or technology just absolutely rocketed?
Yeah, I think we were fortunate to get it into a time, but that there was a big teething problem we have. And for anyone that was doing something like this, I'd say, partnering with someone who is immersed in software is so important, because the problem that we faced really early on was that we created a web app. And at that time, technology was coming out. I think, there was initially an iPod that had a screen that you could interact with, a smart screen. And we never saw at that time that, smartphones and tablets were going to be a thing. We plowed a load of money into this and then thought, oh my God, the iPhone has come out and it's revolutionizing the way people do business. And there's got apps on there. If my kids heard me talking now, they'd be thinking, what are you talking about, Dad? Of course there's apps. Like they don't remember that time when there weren't. And so we then had this decision of what do we do? And so we decided to reinvest and try and create, mobile apps. And actually that's because we didn't have the corporate knowledge within software or within the tech world to know what was going to come out, what was going to be the next big thing, what did the customers want. And in actual fact, we probably should have just carried on, because we created all of these mobile apps, but the physios at the coalface were still asking for web apps. And for us, that was our naivety in not doing enough market research. We weren't business people, we were just clinicians that thought, Billy Big Balls over here, I could make a company and become a millionaire. This experience has taught me a bit of humility, that I'm not as good as I thought I was, and that actually, learning is the most important thing. And if you want to get somewhere, it's not just about working hard, it's working smart and reading and learning your way through a challenge.
Yeah. And where do you see it going then? What's like the goal now?
You know what, I was contemplating that this week, and I'm really happy with where Rehab Guru is. Not just so like the current production version, the current platform, the current customers, the things that we have created and that we're going to bring out over the next 6 months. I'm just so excited by it, because it's the first time where we have had customers to engage with. It's the first time where I've got products that I'm so proud of, that I actually have absolute faith that they're going to do really well. And I'm just excited to see how my ex-colleagues, how my friends, how future users are going to react to these, and how they're going to help them to save tons of time writing their notes, you know, do things better, do things smarter, make a bit more money, because, you know, everyone's thinking about that at the moment. And just seeing how, you know, it's problem solving ultimately. And as a physio, as a healthcare professional, that's what you're doing all day long. And, you know, the business, managing a business is problem solving. And, you know, like you said, you know, what problems does it solve? Well, managing to plan those out and then plan your attack and then put it on. It's actually really exciting to see how that's going to respond. And, you know, there is a phrase from the military that no plan survives first contact. So I'm aware that it you know, I'm going to have to maneuver and stuff, but I'm just really excited to see how it's going to go. So there have been companies that have approached us and said, can we buy you, blah, 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 blah. Do you want investment? You know, we're a company that specializes in funding rounds and whatever. I'm really excited just to push things on just with us as they are, and just and see how that goes, because I'm super excited. I think it's going to be great.
That's good. It's great to hear that natural enthusiasm about things, and it definitely looks, and from the people I've spoken with, they're all really positive about the way you're doing things and the product itself. So I wish you all the best with that. And so just before we move off, just I'm always intrigued, certainly now that you say you're naive, but you're running a business. So, you know, I'm sure that's not the case. And so what sort of professional development things do you do beyond NLP? Like any books that you particularly like?
Yeah, there's a few books that I've been reading at the moment, and the more what I've noticed, so I mentioned one of my mentors, John Trafford, who I met during volunteering. And what strikes me about him is how cool he is under pressure. There is nothing that rattles him. So for me, what I've recognized about my behaviors, and I think that's what it is, it's reading things, learning things that are going to raise our awareness. When do we feel challenged? How do we behave when we're challenged? Do we put blinkers on? Do we put our head down and just burrow in and think, I just need to work hard? Or do we remain really calm? And do we manage to analyze everything that's going on calmly and smoothly and just make a sensible decision? And the more reading I do now is for my own personal emotional development, to keep me in the right mental state, that in any situation I'm making better decisions because I'm perceiving things better than I was 5 years ago. So I okay, what have I read in the last, what are the last 3 books that I've read? The last book that I've read was Hellman to the Himalayas. So one of the lads that I worked with, and looking at his challenges, he's really open about that, and it's a great book, and how he's come through those. And he now works for the Royal Foundation, so he's been sort of like right-hand man to Harry and William for a really long time. And from where he was, I mean, like the guy is just unbelievable. Another book that I read was on laughter yoga, just because one of my colleagues went on a laughter yoga retreat, and we all thought she was a bit mad, but she was super happy. And after going on this retreat, she changed, and she wasn't quite as anxious or nervous about stuff, and things in her life just went really well. All these synchronicities came back. So it was the middle of lockdown, and lockdown was just starting to finish, and we were all working together in the MOD, and suddenly she was off in this Caribbean island working for the wealthiest people in the world. And she got all of these, just luck was just coming her way. And she was convinced it's because she was just viewing the world differently. When challenges were coming at her, she was just seeing them differently. And so I was with my daughters, and I was in a shop, and I just saw this book, Laughter Yoga. And I thought, Dave, don't do it. Don't tell anyone that you're reading it anyway. And I read it, and so it's written by a doctor. So he talks about all of the physiological benefits of laughing, and that actually laughing we do for about 2 or 3 seconds, but sustained laughing, fake laughing ultimately, has all of these amazing benefits for your heart, for your respiratory system, for your blood vessels, for all sorts of stuff. And so I thought maybe I should give this a go. And I've got to say, I felt like a real plonker. But I did it twice, and I felt so different. So I'm convincing some of my friends to join me. And the third one, what was the book I read before then? Now I'm drawing a little bit. Oh, it's the one that I've ordered, Jacko's book. So those are the sort of books that I read, just to sort of expand my mind. And if there's something that makes me think, oh, don't read it, you'll be ashamed if your friends knew that you were going to read that. Like the cave that holds your gold are the caves that you fear to go into. So when you're drawn to something, but you think, don't do it. Those are the steps that you need to take. And so I sort of let my intuition guide me on those things.
Yeah, very much so. Like when you mentioned about like the mindset thing, I fully agree that mindset, every day, like you still think, God, everything is mindset. Like that's really anything can be done. It's all in your own head. So did you say there was a specific book that you'd read around that, or is that just something that the guy that you'd been mentored by?
Yeah, so John gives me, again, he's, like I said, he's unconsciously competent at these things. So he doesn't teach me about those, but there's just other courses that I've been on, sort of like therapeutic courses, therapeutic NLP or therapeutic, whatever it happens to be, healing courses, yoga courses. Those are the things that I'm sort of investing my time and money in to complement where I am in business, because what we realized within Rehab Guru is that I could go and do a master's in business, but by the time I learn all of the lessons which I would need to learn for Rehab Guru, it would be too late. So what we do instead is we just identify people within business that will help us to propel the platform forward. So an example of that, one of my ex-colleagues from the military, she left physio, and she went and did a business degree, and she now works for Holland and Barrow, organising their business and marketing. And before she worked for Holland and Barrow, we had a chat like this on another podcast where she was interviewing me, and I just thought, yeah, I want to work with you, Fee. So we had her work with us for 6 months to a year, and just pushing on and commercializing our business more and more. And so those courses that I've been on, those books that I read, also help me to manage relationships, which, as you all know, Andy, when you're running a business and you want to get the best out of your staff, you want your staff to turn up for work really passionate because they love what they do, not doing it because it's a check at the end of the month, not because it's just filling a gap until they find something better. They want to work because they want to work, because they love who they're working with. And so now where we're managing certain staff, it's really important that they're happy and that they're driven and passionate and that they're in the right job. So yeah, that's really important for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's the same, like we were discussing this the other day as well, in terms of like the relationships of who you work with. It's the same thing, like you're selling your product, we're selling our products, but you don't want it to be that transactional thing. It's like, it's great to hear that you're putting the features in that your clients want, and it's not just you just doing things. It's a partnership, isn't it? It's a relationship. That's the whole thing. So no, it all sounds great, and I really appreciate your time today, Dave. It's good. It's great to hear that you're really motivated yourself, and you didn't give up after, that 18-month thing. You managed to get in a couple of months early. So I'll look forward to seeing the growth of Rehab Guru and anything else that you're working on. So I really appreciate your time.
Super. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's always a joy chatting to you, Andy. It's lovely, and I'll catch you for a beer in Manchester soon, hopefully.
Always welcome. Always welcome. Cheers,
All right.
Dave. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Bye-bye.